Hi, everyone. Bob Crimmins here, founder Startup Haven. We're excited about having you join us today. We've got a terrific member of Startup Haven and terrific founder and very, very experienced in fundraising. So I'm honored to have Nathan with us today to talk about some of his learnings and advice on fundraising. So we'll get into that in a second, but I wanted to first share with everyone, in case you're not aware. So Startup Haven is a network of venture scale founders and investors. We were founded in 2006, and it started around a poker game, a very fun, low stakes poker game that taught me that there's power in getting people around a table, giving them something to do, and allowing them to build relationships. So for now 18 years, we've been helping founders connect with each other and with investors to build those relationships. Over the years, that's grown into a North American network of more than 2,300 founders and investors. And one of the things that we do that's a little bit different is we make sure that everyone is vetted to make sure they're in the game, working full-time, at a minimum, working full-time on a venture scalable company with some elements of progress, traction, commercialization, something, and active investors who are interested in finding their next venture scale startup investment. So we're in about 14 cities right now. We're launching in some more cities this year. Very excited about that. Growing the network, trying to build a simple way, a low noise, high signal way for very, very busy founders and investors to find each other, build relationships, and help each other. So a number of things we do to help facilitate that. And as we launch in more and more cities, we'll be launching more and more of those tools. And I'm very, very excited about the impact I think that we can have in ecosystems far and wide. What we're doing today is called a member brief, and we do these to provide a platform for our members, who are all experienced founders and investors, to share their stories, their wisdom, advice, and with other founders and investors. So we call it a member brief, and the brief today will be with Nathan, and we do these roughly once a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it's just a way for us to amplify the lessons that many of our members have learned. So I hope that you guys get value out of this. Nathan's an incredible guy. In fact, I'm going to bring him on stage now, and I'll say a little bit about him, but I'll let him introduce himself as well. What I can tell you about Nathan is that I met Nathan some years ago at an event, and he was sharing, actually, Nathan, I don't know if you'll remember this or not. And Nathan, you can go ahead and turn your camera on if you're there.
Yep.
Oh, there he is. Yeah. So do you remember the first time we met?
No, I don't actually.
So you were standing at a table at the launch festival, peddling your wares. You were one of the startups that was on display at the launch festival in San Francisco. I don't know, it was years ago, many years ago. And I went up to you and I said, wow, this, I think this is really valuable. I had already raised money for several companies, or at least a couple companies by then. I think I was probably my third company by the time I met you and I saw you. And up until then, I had done all my fundraising, if I were, when I was on my game, in a spreadsheet, right? And I remember seeing your thing and I was like, wait, that's a CRM dedicated, like it's built for startups to raise capital. I was fascinated. So I probably spent 5 minutes picking your brain about it. You'd be forgiven for not remembering that. Obviously, there was a lot of people there at that launch festival and you talked to a lot of people, but that was the first time I saw you. And then I was at an event where you were speaking again. This time, I don't think it was Venture Hacks. I don't know that you'd had developed it by then, but you were at a co-working space and you were speaking on some topic, and I was there, and there was couple of other investors that I was talking to, and it's like, oh yeah, I met this guy a long time ago. He goes, oh yeah, we love what he's working on. Like, love the system, right? So I approached you at that event and said, hey, by the way, I'd like to invite you to come join us at one of our, poker games or dinners or something like that. And I think you were skeptical, like, wait, who is this guy? What poker? What in the world? And you were very polite and said, well, yeah, that sounds interesting. Let's follow up. And then it was sometime after that where I think finally I didn't look like a crazy man, and you're like, oh, okay, I get that. This is legit. And then I got to know more about you and about Foundersuite, and wouldn't have predicted it at the time, because when I met you, I was a founder. And when I finally, I think, connected with you in a way that made you think I wasn't a crazy person, I was still a founder, but subsequently went on then, of course, to raise a venture fund, and was excited to be able to use, Foundersuite to raise my fund one. I actually used Foundersuite to do that, even though at the time, it worked really well. It's very, very analogous. I didn't feel like there's any compromise to using it back then. But as I understand now, you've actually done a number of things to make that even better for funds. So, any case, as I got to know you, I saw how experienced you were, and I'm delighted to have you participate in Startup Haven, obviously, and to have this opportunity now to allow you to share so much of what you've learned with other members. But first, please just introduce yourself better than I could. Let people know like who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fun. And it's a fun trip down memory lane, because I do remember that. And to be clear, I want to clarify something. I didn't, if I was any reluctant to get involved in Startup Haven, it wasn't because I thought you were a crazy person. It's because I'm a terrible poker player, and I think I'm self-conscious about my poker skills. So I was probably a little wary about coming to a poker session, only because I'm no good.
Well, that's the bane of my existence, is letting people know that it's the best place to learn the game, right? Yeah. The whole thing started because I wanted to learn, and it's remained, I hope, the best way to learn. It's not about the poker; it's about who's at the table. So
that's right. That's right. Very good. Well, awesome. Let me jump into this, I guess, and I'll kind of give my quick backstory on this. Go ahead and share my screen.
And let me just say for people, so what we're going to do, so Nathan is a master at this. He's been doing this for a while, and he's got a bunch of stuff he wants to share with you, and I don't want to get in the way. So what we're going to do, we'll hear a little bit more from Nathan about his background, and I'm going to sit back and learn too with all the rest of you. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A. If you put your questions now, or as you have them, in the Q&A section, we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation, and then we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of other things. But we're gonna wind him up and let him go. And then I'm going to come in the end, and I'll have a couple of questions, I'm sure, and then we'll see if anybody else has some questions. So
perfect.
Take it away, Nathan.
All right. Screen okay?
Yeah, it looks good.
Perfect. So Bob already gave me a little bit of background, but I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I graduated college and went into investment banking, helping companies raise capital, worked during the dot-com bubble, helping companies go public, worked in New York at JP Morgan, helping companies raise later stage rounds, and then came back out to California and spent about 10 years helping early stage companies raise capital as a consultant, fractional CFO, and then had this idea, let's build tools for doing this. Because like Bob said, everything was being done on spreadsheets, which really aren't that efficient. And that was around the time that Mark Andreessen had his "software is eating the world" quote. And I'm like, you know what? This process should be done by software instead of spreadsheets and sticky notes. So, long story short, that's what led me to launch Foundersuite 7 years ago. And then more recently, and since then, we've had 87,000 startups use it, 17 billion raised. And then more recently, just a few months ago, we launched Fundingstack for venture funds because it's a similar process. Venture funds have to go out, raise money. And so we've built a platform for them as well. So basically, long story short, my whole career has been doing nothing but raise capital for companies and funds. And this talk is basically everything I've learned from that, condensed into about 45 minutes. First off is how not to do it. Hunter Walk is a VC here in San Francisco, and I just love this quote or this tweet. Will you intro me to investors? Is too broad a question to be acted upon, but this is how a lot of founders approach fundraising. Is they just start asking everyone they know if they can make connections for them. And while that's logical, it's too unfocused. It's too ambiguous. It's putting the hard work of figuring out who you should be targeting on the other person, where really that's your job as a CEO. So instead of doing it like this, I like to think about fundraising as a sales process. Especially if you've ever done B2B sales, it's pretty straightforward, right? You're building a list of leads or targets or prospects. You're qualifying them, you're engaging with them, and ultimately you're driving them all towards a close, towards a yes or no decision. And we can apply that to fundraising as well. I like to think of it using our funnel metaphor, right? Top of the funnel, you're building this large target list of investors. You're screening, filtering, qualifying that list. And then the third and fourth little buckets, I guess, are where it does differ a little bit from sales. With fundraising, you got to figure out, if you don't just go pitch Excel Ventures or Sequoia, you got to find the right person, the right partner at that fund that does your type of deal. And the fourth little one here, so much of fundraising runs on the warm introduction, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But anyway, those introductions get you into the pitch meetings. You're crushing it with your pitch meetings. You're getting into due diligence and term sheet discussions. If you're not familiar with due diligence, it's basically a deep dive into your business. When we raised capital, I got a term sheet from a VC on a Friday. I was all excited. And then on Monday, they gave me their due diligence list, which was 200 items. They needed articles of incorporation, customer references, personal references, financials, Google Analytics, all kinds of stuff, right? But you get through due diligence, you are selling shares of your company or executing a SAFE or convertible note. But essentially, this is just another sales process that everyone can learn pretty quickly. So step one is to build that funnel. I tell founders every day that fundraising is a numbers game. You've got to talk to a lot of investors to find the ones that are believers. And, especially in this market, it's still pretty tough market right now. Things are, I think, starting to look up and kind of tick back up. But after, bumper crop years in 21, 22, 23 got pretty cold. And we're still kind of thawing out from that. So anyway, for early stage companies, I say you need at least 200 names. And frankly, in this market, maybe that's 300, 400 names. And the reason is you're going to get rejected almost all the time. When I raised our seed round, I pitched 200 investors and ended up with one seed venture fund and 10 angels. And you can do that math. That's about a 5% conversion rate between who I pitched and who wrote me a check. You can also do the math. That means I got rejected 95% of the time, right? What other task do you do that you're getting rejected 95% of the time? But that's reality. That's very normal. We even see that on Foundersuite, where 5 to 6% conversion rate is very typical. So that just further emphasizes why you need a really healthy top of the funnel. So how do we do that? A couple different ways. I'll try not to make this too much of a product plug, but we do have a pretty nice database within Foundersuite, about 150,000 investors, soon to grow closer to 200K. And we've got them tagged by type. I'll just show it really, really quick. Again, not to make this a product plug, but just to see what I'm talking about. We've got these investors in here, and you can search by type of investor if you're looking for angel VC. I usually tell people to search by industry. So if you're in, let's say maybe fintech, just start typing the first couple letters and then pick whatever is the most relevant category for you. And then look at the results. And if someone catches your eye, like Wavemaker Partners, open it up. And here's what I tell people to do. So first of all, skim and see what kind of deals they're investing in. Maybe look at their social feeds. Sometimes we'll have reviews on these investors from our community, but then open up their web page and do two things here. So one, look at their, okay, I've never been here before, so I don't really know their site, but look at their portfolio. Okay, their website's really weird. I'm not going to go through this because I've never been here before, but do two things. Look at their portfolio, make sure they don't have a competing investment. And then two, look at the team and find the right person that does your type of deal. Ideally, a partner, managing partner, probably not an associate if you can get away with it. But, so let's say you're digging into them a little bit. And if Wavemaker looks good, you'd simply choose who you want to add. I wouldn't recommend more than 2 people or so, and then that's going to drop them onto the CRM. So that's how to use Foundersuite, and you can use this on a free plan with limitations. Crunchbase is another obvious place to start looking for investors. You can search around in Crunchbase, but I actually like to use Crunchbase a little bit differently. I make a list of 10 companies that are similar to mine, but not directly competitive. Similar, but not competitive. And Carta, I kind of consider them, they're quasi-competitive with what we do a little bit, but not really. They're more cap table management. And let's say I was raising a Series A round, I might add, Expansion Venture Capital and, I don't know, K9 Ventures to my pipeline. Also, when you get a venture fund or an investor committed, you can plug them in and it'll show you who they co-invest with. So that's pretty interesting as well. But there are just tons of places to find investors out there. This first bullet here, P-Hub, Venture Pulse, Strictly VC, these are newsletters you can subscribe to. I like Strictly VC. I kind of read that every day. And basically, when a startup raises capital, they'll announce it in these newsletters. So you can see who's getting funded and who's backing them, who's funding them. Also, when a new venture fund is formed or when a venture fund raises a new fund, they'll announce it. And, if you're not familiar with how venture works, a venture fund will raise a $50 million fund, do a lot of new deals, maybe spend half of that fund doing a bunch of deals in the first 2 years or so. And then they'll save half of that fund roughly and double down on their winners. So the best venture fund to be pitching is one that just raised a new fund. Conferences can be an interesting place to find investors, right? If you're in blockchain or cannabis or whatever, go look at the agenda. Go back even a couple of years in the conferences and look at the speaker list, right? Because investors love to build their brand by getting out there. Quora, TechCrunch, Medium, you guys are familiar with all this stuff, but one kind of fun hack here is when you find an investor on Foundersuite or Crunchbase or wherever, go follow them on Twitter, and Twitter will then recommend, similar investors, and look and see if they have a blog on Medium or even Substack, and follow them, follow their blog. And what's cool about Medium is if you're following these people and or interacting on their articles, liking their articles, Medium will send you a daily digest of recommended other authors. Oftentimes it's other VCs. So you almost get like a feed of potential prospects right into your inbox without doing any work. Kind of nice. PitchBook, CB Insights. These are databases. There are others out there like Signal by NFX, AngelList, of course. These two are paid databases, pretty expensive. I think PitchBook's about $30,000 a year per seat. But if you have access to this, a friend who will let you use it for a bit, really good stuff. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to tap your own personal network to add investors. So let's start with LinkedIn. So I do have a premium version, but you don't need the paid version of it. Let's say I was raising a seed round. Go up here, do a generic search like angel investor. I'm going to filter it by people. Okay, so 103,000 results. Obviously, that is way larger than I can do anything with. So I want to apply a few filters. I might do a first degree connection filter just to remind myself, who am I connected to that, considers himself an angel investor. But really the hack here is do second degree and then apply another filter or two. I am going to go, just for kicks, I'm going to do Seattle, just for fun. And okay, so much more manageable results. This is showing me there are 564 people in the greater Seattle area that call themselves an angel investor that I have at least one mutual connection to. So theoretically, I should be able to get in touch with any of these 500 people. But that does not mean that all 500 people are relevant for my type of deal. I consider Foundersuite SaaS, FinTech, SMB. And so I'm looking for clues in each profile here. Does this person look like they might do my type of deal or not do my type of deal? And so I will command click or right click, 10 at a time, maybe. I mean, you can do as many as you want, but I'll just open up a few here. And then once again, I'm spending, 30 seconds to a minute scrolling through their profiles, looking for clues. Does Shani Chang do my type of deal or not do my type of deal? Oftentimes, okay, she doesn't really have an about section, which is strange. Oftentimes people will have that in their about section, right? What they're looking for. I might click through to their Alliance of Angels, see what she's doing. Okay, here's a little bit. So she might just be working in an angel group as kind of the screener. That's possibly a clue there. Nothing really jumps out at me, but I might click through to this and see what she's done. But let's say nothing really jumped out at me. Command W, close. Move on to Andrew Wang. And, same process here. And kind of similar, actually. He is also a member of this angel group. I'm not seeing what he's invested in. Oftentimes you can find it either in the about section or in their experience section. Bad example. Let's go look at Dan DePasquo. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is a little bit more typical. He actually has stuff in here about what he's doing. Let's see if he lists his investments. Yeah, okay, this is actually interesting. So I like this guy already. So he invests in Venture Us, whatever that is. I'd probably Google these, search these, figure out, make sure Venture Us, whatever that is not directly competitive. But he looks good to me. Okay, so I'm going to add Dan DePasquo to my CRM or my spreadsheet, whatever I'm using. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to click this and find my best mutual connection. I went to college with Brian. Yaz is a customer of mine. Andre, I went to college with. So I have great connections to this guy. I'd probably even put, to recap, I'm going to add the investor, his name was John, to my CRM. And then in the connector field in my CRM, I'm going to add, probably Brian or Andre as the connector. That means I'm going to be asking those guys for that intro when the time comes. So boom, moving on. You can see how quickly this can go once you kind of develop a rhythm about this. And you're just wanting to process all this. So that is how to use LinkedIn to build your network. I'm going to show you one other little tactic I did when I was raising. I actually used my CRM in a specific way. This is our investor pipeline. And the point is I want to show you this column. I don't know if you can read it very well, but this column is called Steve B Leads. And so what I did is I came over here, I added a new column, called it Steve B Leads. Then I went into settings, invited Steve Bennett. He's a real human. He's a professor. He's a fractional CFO, very well connected in Silicon Valley. And he's one of my advisors. He's one of my mentors and advisors. And so I added him call him and invited him in and said, hey, Steve, I'm building out my investor pipeline. I've made you a column. Could you add some people from your network that you'd be willing to introduce me to? And he did. He added like 10 or 12 names to his column. And I repeated this process with 5 or 6 other advisors and mentors. And I generated like 60 good warm intros directly into my CRM by having a structured way of asking my advisors and mentors to open up their network. So very effective, to get warm intros. So last but not least, as Yoda says here, once you kind of start this process and looking at all these different sources, you will develop a radar and you'll just start to see investors everywhere, right? There's no shortage of investors out there. So that's that. Let's move on here. So once we've built this list of, call it 300, maybe 400 investor targets, we actually want to start removing people off this list. Back to fundraising as a sales process, the best salespeople, the most productive salespeople, don't chase every prospect equally. They prioritize them, they qualify them, they rank them. So they're spending their time efficiently. And we want to do that with fundraising. So anyone who's invested in a competitor, just cross them off right away. Don't even bother with them. Number 2, if a venture fund has not raised a new fund in the last couple of years, they might be just focusing on doing follow-on investments in their existing portfolio companies. And I've wasted a lot of time over the years chasing and pitching venture funds that don't have dry powder. It doesn't mean you should totally cross them off the list right away. Maybe you move them down your list, or you move them to the top of your list and use them as kind of pitch practice. Bob is a VC. I hope this doesn't, hopefully this isn't putting bad thoughts in people's heads. But frankly, it's kind of like having that informational interview when you're graduating college or something. You don't go in your first top choice as your very first interview, right? Same thing with venture funds. So number 3 here, angel investors. If you're finding a couple angel investors and you look on their LinkedIn or look on their angel list and all their deals are from 5 years ago, they might be taking a break. Conversely, your ideal goal is to find investors who are actively investing. Wrong sector, wrong stage, wrong geographic location. This should all be pretty obvious. Right, if you're medical devices, you would not be pitching a fintech investor and vice versa. Stage trips people up. Growth capital means later stage. You'll develop a few, some of these nuances as you get into it. And geographic location. Some funds do still have a very specific criteria. Like we invest in New York tri-state startups, or we invest in Pacific Northwest startups. Sometimes that's part of their fund thesis. And so they're not going to look at, companies from Silicon Valley or New York or whatever, right? But many investors are much more open than they were even 5-10 years ago. COVID really changed everything. With everyone pitching on Zoom, investors are willing to look at stuff from kind of all over the place. And that's great for startups that are not in Silicon Valley, right? Really kind of democratizes and opens up capital. And then last but not least, bad reputation, right? You're going to be working with these investors for the next 6 to 8 years of your life, maybe longer. I've seen many horror stories where investors make founders' lives hell. If they control the board, they can fire you. Or, not supporting, there's the adverse signaling if they're not, wanting to come in your next round. There's all kinds of ways investors can make your life bad. So you want to be choosing wisely. Bottom line here, as a good rule of thumb, I recommend removing around 25 to 30% of your funnel so that what remains is a really highly focused, highly targeted set of investors. This will make your actual fundraising go much more efficient if the only ones on your CRM are ones that are looking and doing your type of deal, your stage, your geography, etc. It'll just make everything go better the more time you spend qualifying and researching investors. Okay, so great. We've built this list. We've qualified it. We've scrubbed it. Now we want to figure out how to get in touch with these people, right? LinkedIn is your friend here. Plug each one into LinkedIn, see if you have any mutual connections. If you don't have any mutual connections, my favorite funding hack is to go, Tim's the investor, target investor in this case, go look at and see what Tim has invested in the last 6 months or so, and cold email a couple of those founders in a very casual, polite, friendly way. Like, hey, I see Tim invested in you guys. I'm Nathan. This is what I do. Can I buy you lunch and just pick your brain a little bit about working with Tim? Has he been pretty active? Is he more of a passive investor? Can I just get on Zoom with you for a few minutes and talk about this? And if you build a little rapport with those founders, it's fine, very fine, and accepted to ask for that intro to Tim. And the reason this works so well is Tim spent 3 to 6 months getting to know that founder, building trust with that founder. And that founder was hustling for intros just like you're doing, 6 months or 12 months ago, right? And founders are great about helping other founders. So that's my hack for getting those warm intros, even if you have zero network. If you're not wanting to do that, there's always the cold email option. I was on a conference call with Jeff Clavier of I think it's Uncork Capital is his name now. Very active seed stage fund. And a question came up on this conference, like, do you or have you ever invested in deals that came in over cold email? And he's like, yes, we have. We've done 2 deals that came in over cold out of 760 portfolio companies. So it's not impossible, but your odds are pretty low doing cold email. Now, having said all of that, cold email still happens all the time. People use it. I've used it. If I can't find a mutual connection or an intro path, I'm going to do cold email. And if you're going to do that, you make sure your emails are extremely personalized. Investors can smell from a mile away when they're on a recipient list of, a spam list, right? So if you're going to write Tim a cold email, just make it extremely personalized. Why that you followed him, you understand what he's interested in, what he's done deals in the past, and why you're a good fit for him. And we're even though I say warm intro, we are building in. We've actually built in Chat GPT integration into our email tool to help you with those cold emails. So I speak a little bit out of both sides of my mouth, but try and get the warm intro is the bottom line there. You got to stay organized in all this. You've got a target list of maybe 250, good investor candidates now. Every time you have a meeting or call with one of these investors, it's going to lead to 2 or 3 follow-up action items. What has to happen next? And while a spreadsheet can help you for a first week or 2, it gets really messy. I used to build these spreadsheets for startups, and it worked great for temporarily, which is, of course, why we built Foundersuite. It's really, I'd like to think, very thoughtfully designed around fundraising specifically, and pretty flexible too. But even if you don't use Foundersuite, maybe you're already a Salesforce junkie or HubSpot or something else. I strongly believe founders need a CRM to stay on top of all this. Fundraising runs on momentum and tempo. A deal, you want your deal to get hot and have energy to it. And it's hard to do that if things are taking too long. You never want to be the bottleneck in the fundraise. You never want it where investors are waiting on you for stuff, right? And all these follow-up action items, to do, task lists, especially when you get into due diligence, you've got to have a system for staying organized. So get a CRM, whether it's us or someone else, figure it out. It'll make your life much easier. Before we get out there talking to investors, only spend a minute on this. Make sure your pitch deck is absolutely crushing it. Probably the number 1 or 2 reason I see startups fail at fundraising is their pitch and materials are too cluttered, too messy. They don't tell a story. There's no emotional connection. There's no logical financial connection, right? And it's just, a mess, right? And investors don't have patience for that. And you can't do a redo, right? Investor says no, you're pretty much dead to them. You can't go back a month later and I improved my deck. So make sure your pitch is crushing it. Give your pitch in front of, 10 fellow founders, Startup Haven folks who will give you honest feedback. And then I also recommend having a nice financial model, right? You're raising $1 million. How are you going to spend that money? Where will it take your business over the next 12, 18 months? And what does your business model look like at scale? So do that. And then I also like a little 1-page executive summary or tear sheet. Step 5. All right, we're kind of getting into outreach mode here. When you're doing step 3, which was mapping your connection paths, you might find that you have some power connectors in your network. Jeff is a real person. He works at NASDAQ. He knows basically everyone. And when I was researching all these investors, I found that Jeff was connected to a lot of them, right? So I put together an email to Jeff saying, hey, Jeff, I'm raising this round. I see you're connected to a lot of these investors I want to get to know. Do you know them well enough to make an intro? And he can just respond, yes, I know Tom, I know Sean, I know Jessica. Wesley's not doing new deals. Clark, I don't really know. The other guys, I don't know. He can just go, yes, no, right? For everyone he says yes, I put together an email like this. This is the intro request email, a very important email in your existence. This is the intro request email. And first thing I want to point out, notice how short this is. Another mistake I see founders make is they will, in this intro email, they'll put in 8 paragraphs of dense text describing the company's entire history, and they'll attach a 45 megabyte PowerPoint with animation and blah, blah, blah. No one's even going to look at that. No one's going to read it. No one's going to look at that. Shorter is always better. So first of all, do it, make it short. Subject line, very important. Jeff, can you introduce me to target investor? And then what are we doing? Raising a seed round. We had a lead investor at this point. We had 2/3 of the round committed. So I put that in here, but of course we didn't start off with that. What I recommend is putting whatever is the single most exciting, sexy data point about your business in the subject line, because these guys and gals are getting 50 to 100 warm intros a day. You want to make sure they open up your email. You want to make sure they actually look at it. Jeff, okay, then the body. Good chatting with you. As mentioned, I'm raising a seed round. Here's what we do. We make an investor management reporting platform. Here's a link to our site. Then next sentence, then they ask, could you introduce me to target investor? Then why? Because he does our type of deal. And then I noticed this guy went to the same very small college in Iowa that my dad went to, tiny little place. And so I put that in here just to personalize this a bit. And then I include a link to our deck. And this is not a full deck. This is what I call a teaser deck. It is problem, solution, market, traction, team. 5 slides. Problem, solution, market, traction, team. And that is enough information for Clint, the investor, to get a feel for who are we, what are we doing, what stage we're at, what's the opportunity, and does he want to take a meeting, right? I'd actually rather have him look at that teaser deck and say, hey, Jeff, these guys are too early for me, but thank you. I'd rather have him kind of opt out. So I'm using this as another way to pre-qualify this investor. I'd rather have him opt out than me driving an hour and a half down to meet him for lunch and wasting half a day, right? Also, if he does want to take a meeting, I can go into our little analytics and see, oh, he looked at my deck for 7 minutes or 0 minutes. I can kind of tailor my pitch around that. And now Jeff can just hit forward. Jessica, my friend Nathan wants an intro. Can I connect you guys? Boom. Clint, my friend Nathan is looking for an intro. Can I connect you? Boom. Jeff can make these intros really, really quick because I've made it easy for him. Okay, so it's game on time. Someday I'm going to take this slide out, but not yet. This is a reference to HBO's Silicon Valley, one of my favorite shows on the planet. And it's a few years old now, which is, someday I need to take this out, but I just love this show. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's really fun. It follows a fictional startup called Pied Piper. The guy in the middle is the CEO. He's an engineer. He's an introvert, very nerdy. All he wants to be doing is writing compression algorithms, but he's got to get out there and meet all these investors. And all these investors are very smart. 40% of all VCs went to Stanford or Harvard. That's a real stat. Many have big egos. This guy up in the upper right-hand corner, Trace Commas Club. And investing is what they do all day long, every day, right? So they're professionals at this. Whereas for Richard in the middle, it's his first time. So it's very stressful. It's going to be stressful for everyone. The best way to overcome that is to, what I like to say, channel your inner hustler and kind of treat it like a game, right? Just have fun with it. You're going to learn a lot about your business, get a lot of feedback, sometimes mixed feedback, but just get out there and hustle, even if it's not your natural, ability, and make it fun. Couple hustle tips here. Doing the intros in parallel, meaning asking your connectors for those intros all in a pretty condensed time frame. We want to, we call it the blitzkrieg approach. We want to get calendar density in terms of pitch meetings. And our goal here, if you don't remember anything else from this talk, your goal as CEO is to get momentum going for your deal. Investors can smell when a deal has momentum. They can smell when a deal does not have momentum, and they can smell when a deal has gone stale. And so you want to be smelling like momentum. So what does that mean? So, every time you have a pitch meeting, an investor's going to say something like, so how's the round coming together? How's the fundraising going? That's their little probe. Does this guy have momentum or not? You want to be able to answer that with something like, it's going pretty good. We just started a week ago. I've got 14 meetings this week. I've got 16 next week. We're running a pretty efficient process using Foundersuite, of course. We've got a timeline. I'm aiming to close this round out by Memorial Day, or maybe I wouldn't give a firm date. We're aiming to close this round out by middle of Q2, something like that. That is signaling to that investor, other investors are interested. You're running a professional fundraise, like you're actually kind of know what you're doing, right? You've got a timeline. And so if they're even remotely interested, they kind of need to march to your timeline, because investors, bless their hearts, they will wait, watch and wait. If you let them, they will drag their feet. And I've seen fundraisers just drag out forever because there's no momentum involved. And then it gets stale, and then the deal's dead. So try and get the momentum going. On the pitch, you should be always refining your pitch, right? When I was raising our seed round, I would go pitch a bunch of investors, come home, put my kids to bed, crack open a couple beers, and just work on my pitch deck. And we were on version number 52 by the time we finally raised the round. Also, in your first, call it 5 pitch meetings, bring your co-founder or a mentor and just have her write down every question the investor asks, and then go build an appendix slide for that question, right? Don't let your deck get bloated. Just build appendix slides. And then two of my very favorite hacks of all time in fundraising. One is sending a regular progress update or company update to everyone in your pipeline who has not told you no. So let me repeat that. Everyone who has not told you no, go away, don't talk to me anymore, should be getting a monthly company update from you. And again, you can do this in email, but we have a tool for this. But let me just point out what that update should look like. So a little bit about what you do. Start off with what you do. This is going to be a pretty much static section, right? You're not going to change this every month. Maybe you update a few numbers here and there, but it's basically what you do. Because every month, hopefully you've added new people to your distribution list. They need to be reminded what you do. Then follow that up with what happened last month, key wins, product releases, traction, revenue, maybe any press you got, anything that's exciting about your business, put it in the key wins, showing you've got some business momentum going. Then some metrics, and then put in a image of your product. Even if your product is boring or scientific or technical or whatever, put in an image of your product every single time. Then show what you're going to be doing next. What's happening? New product release, new partnership deal, whatever's coming up the next month. And then put in a team shot. Doesn't have to be as fun and exciting as this. Could be, if you're in biotech or something, get in your lab coats and get in the lab and get someone to take a photo, right? So it's just nice and simple. And that's all. That's all. So look how short that is. This should take you about 15 minutes. But you start to send this out every month, and bonus points if you can actually start this process, a few months before for fundraising. So maybe you do this for your next round. Start it now, but do it for your next round. I have seen, let's say you're raising your Series A. Maybe you're finishing your seed right now, and you're raising Series A after Labor Day, just as an example. Start sending this update now to all these investors. May, June, July, August, 4 months of these updates, so these investors can see you're making progress. In that August update, top of the screen here, put in something like, we are going to kick off our Series A next month. Let me know if you want early access to our pitch materials. And I have seen deals get swooped up by investors before it even goes on the market, right? So imagine just doing this kind of pre-marketing and not having to go out fundraise for 4 months because you've nurtured these relationships with investors over a period of time. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so actually, let me do one more quick thing. Hopefully I'm okay on time, but I'll go fast. Another little fun little hack is what I call the permission email. And it's very simple. You can write this in your own email, but this is a permission email I would even do with cold email to investors. It's not asking for their money. It's not asking for a meeting or time, not asking for the money or time, simply asking for permission to send that company update I just showed you. I'm a founder of XYZ. We do ABC, and we have some exciting data point. We're not raising money right now, but we plan to raise money after Labor Day. We send out a one-page company update. I would love to give you an early look at what we're building or a sneak peek at what we're building. Can I have your permission to add you to our company update distribution list? So permission email, really nice way to just kind of break the ice with investors with a low ask. No money, no time, just permission. Okay, we're almost done here. So be thinking of your questions. Last but not least, set up a data room. This is another of my new favorite funding hacks. And one more little quick demo. But this is what a data rooms are simple, right? We've got 11 folders here. Corporate docs, financials, product roadmap, all this stuff. You build the folder structure, you populate those folders with your documents. There are 2 reasons I love having a data room ready. Number 1, it's going to make you look like a freaking pro. 1% of startups build a data room before they have to, right? You're going to look like a pro when you have a data room set up. And I told you my story. I got a term sheet from an investor, and then they sent me their huge due diligence list. And it took me like 2.5 months to get everything together for due diligence. And frankly, it felt like the deal was going to fall apart in the middle of due diligence because it took me so long to get everything together. Like, it was dragging out. I lost my momentum. And imagine if on that Monday, when they sent me their due diligence list, I was able to just say, oh, cool. Thanks for the list. I'm going to invite you to my data room. It's all in there. Boom. It would take a day. I mean, it would be just like night and day, right? I'm going to look like a rock star if I do that. The other reason I like the data room is as you're making progress with these investors, right? You're kind of moving them through the stages of your pipeline, and maybe you're getting into pitch meetings, things like that. You can use the data room as a catalyst. So everyone you've pitched, you can then send an email to these guys and say, hey, we're starting to bring this round in for conclusion here. If you're pretty serious about putting down a term sheet, if you're seriously contemplating putting down a term sheet, we're going to be opening up our data room May 15th to June 7th, right? Time bracketed data room access. If you're serious about coming in on a term sheet, I'll give you access to my data room. Do you want access to my data room? And it's a good forcing function for these investors to either get them to, commit or get off the pot and stop wasting your time. So that's another reason I love the data room. Almost done here. Treat fundraising like a full-time job if you can. It'll make everything go better. I'm going to skip this. Just want to spend a minute or two talking about closing your round, right? Every time you have a pitch meeting with an investor, don't hang up on the Zoom or don't exit that room until you've done these first two bullets. One is, as an example, thank you so much. Let me give you an example. Thank you so much for letting me come in here today. I would love to hear what your typical check size is, what your interest level is in my deal, and what are next steps. And then just stop talking. And you'll often get responses like, oh, we'll talk about it at our Monday meeting or whatever. But if you get a next step, that's a good buying signal. Number two here, actually make them chase you a little bit. So every investor who's been doing this for more than a day has lost out on a competitive deal. And so you want to actually make them have to pitch you a little bit. So example, again, at the end of a meeting, you would say something like, thank you so much for letting me, share my vision about Foundersuite. I would love to hear how you help your portfolio companies, and I'd love to hear what ideas you have for helping me grow Foundersuite. And then again, stop talking and actually make them pitch you. And the reason this works is, like I said, every investor's lost out on a deal. So you're signaling they might have to actually hustle to get into your deal. And of course, as your momentum increases and your confidence, that just makes it even more like a piranha feeding frenzy with investors chasing you. It can take multiple meetings before you get that term sheet. General rule of thumb, 80% of your time and effort are getting that first term sheet. Once you get that, 20% of your time and effort to fill out the rest of the round. It can be hard to get an actual no. Over in my CRM, I have a hard no, and then I have a no response column. Those are for people who ghost me, and you're going to get a lot of ghosting. And then I have another column that's not right now, and that's for people who tell me I'm too early, right? And that's kind of another form of no, very common. You're like, hey, I like what you're doing, but you're just a little early for us. I continue to send my company update to the ghosted and not right now people. The hard no's, move on. They're dead to you. But okay, Paul Graham's handshake deal protocol. Basically, what this means is you're out at coffee with an investor and they say, I like it. You're put me down for 50,000. After the meeting, go back to your laptop and just be like, so great to meet you. Excited to have you on board. Just to confirm you're in for 50K. Do you mind just writing back confirming that? And if they do, then pretty safely move them into your committed column. If they don't, they're just still another prospect, like any other prospect. Last but not least, my corny dad joke. How do you know when an investor says yes? When their check clears, when their wire hits your bank account. That's the only true yes, is when the money is in your account. Term sheets are not really a yes. Yeses are not a yes. Investors love conditional yeses and offers. We're in as soon as you find a lead investor. I mean, there's a dozen ways investors say yes without it being a true yes. So just keep hustling, keep your foot on the gas pedal, get it over the finish line, enjoy, celebrate with your team. And then just keep in mind, you've bought yourself 12 months of runway. You really need to start doing this whole process over again 6 months from now, building your target list, sending those permission emails, sending out your company update, nurturing the relationships, so you're ready for your next round. We do have a killer deal. Bob can share more about this, but we've got some really good discount codes if you do want to use our platform. And then I'll just make this last plug. If you want more fundraising content, if this isn't enough, we have a podcast called How I Raised It, where I think we have like 275 interviews with founders just talking about how they raise capital. And there's every story under the sun on here. I've learned a ton from it, and that's also on YouTube. I think that's pretty much everything. But I would love to open this up for any questions.
That was terrific. I've been at this for just a couple minutes, and I can validate 100% of everything that you said is utterly legit. And anybody who's a startup founder who's raising capital, and they're not doing virtually everything that you said to do, they're on the spot. Why would you not do? These are best practices. This is how you raise venture capital. If you want to be a founder and you want to build a business, you don't have to go the venture scale track, right? But if you want to raise money and be on a venture scale track, there is a way to do that. It changes over time, and your very first pre-seed friends and family, it'll be different than your seed. But it's never too early to start treating it as a process, because it is a process. It's one of the things I find myself more often than anything else when I meet early stage funders, and we invest in very early companies. They don't yet know that it is a process, and it's actually something you can learn how to do, and you can get good at it. And I just want to say, there's a few things that you mentioned that are some of my favorite things, and one of them is emailing founders of that your target investors have invested in, and build a little relationship with them. And you're absolutely right that they just went through what you went through, right? And so thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you a question, though, because you said I think you had something like 200 investors on your hit list, and you pitched to 200, and then like 5% invested, right? And it's certainly a number. Yeah. But if you were to post hoc go and look at the folks who said no, do you think there was a way for you to know that some of those investors were destined to be a no, in the same way that you promote filtering? Like, have they ever written a check in your sector? If they haven't, then why do you think you should spend time on them, right? But if you were to look at the ones, even that you went through the filtering process and you still got the no's, I mean, there's some things that aren't knowable. Like, it's actually hard to know sometimes, like if an angel investor is taking a break or not. Yeah. Right. Because a lot of their deals aren't public. You can't really find like who they invested in. They're more private, and they're not listed. But when you think about those 200, like, if you were to go back and do a post hoc analysis on all the ones who said no, what's your suspicion that there was something that you could have seen, you could have filtered harder to say, should I really spend time on that investor?
It's a really good question, because every 200 meetings takes a ton of time, right? Think about how much time it takes to do 200 meetings. So how could I have condensed that and done 100 meetings instead of 200, right? I mean, there's different ways to frame that question. But it is hard, just like you're saying. Like, even though I say maybe don't go pitch funds that haven't raised a new fund, that is not even always that easy to figure out either. So sometimes you just have to get out there and pitch and just do it. Same, like you said, with angel investors, you don't always know if they're taking a break. They might have, like I had pitch meetings where investor really liked what they're doing, but they're waiting on an exit to get some cash. They don't have any cash at the moment. There's always stuff like that that's out of your control. I do think, if I could kind of go back, I mean, there's a million reasons why those investors said no. And a lot of times it was more specific around the investor than things we could figure out. They just didn't see the vision or didn't think the market was big enough. At the time we were selling tools for startups, and people were like, oh, that's too niche. I think in hindsight, it's become a huge market. But anyway, right, there's stuff that you don't know until you actually get out and pitch. I think what I would do differently, kind of, which is a thread of your question, is kind of like, I use my teaser deck as a way to pre-qualify the investor. I might have done a little more pre-qualification of investors and be like, and I've seen on our podcast, we've heard people do this, where before doing a meeting, they'll do a 15 or 20-minute meeting with that investor. Like, let me just have a quick qualification meeting where they ask the investor, are you actively investing right now? Do you have capital to put to work right now? And are you doing this space, right? So we'll pre-qualify a little bit harder, which I think is not a bad idea. It's hard though, because you just kind of have to get out and pitch.
Well, it's funny when you think about, like, no founder said, "Oh, I've got this idea. I want to be a fundraiser," right?
Yeah, right.
But the reality is, if you're if you're not spending 80% of your time, you're probably not doing it right. You might be spending more. It is very, very time consuming. And so and I'm curious what you think about this advice. An investor, a founder turned investor many 20 years ago gave me this advice, and it stuck with me. He said, look, your job when you meet a new investor or there's somebody you want to pitch is to get to the answer no as quickly as you can. Like that's your target. You're not trying to persuade them. You're not trying to court them. Like you have to do a little bit of that. I mean, you got to persuade someone to invest in you. But if you're sort of against a headwind, you feel like you're like working really hard to get this investor. Like you should be doing things to see if they are as interested as you are, and get them to say no. That's why I really love what you said about, hey, thanks for time. Listen to my pitch. Happy to share the vision. Like, how do you view us? Right? Are you interested in us? Are we a good fit? And that's the question I love to get from founders when they pitch me is, do you feel like we're a fit for you?
Yeah.
Right? And even if I don't know, at least you're going to hear me say, well, I don't know yet. And now that opens the question for what else do you need to know to get to a decision? Right. And, certainly you're right. Investors don't want to say no. They're nice people. They want to support you, but I was just listening to a podcast today, interview with a very experienced investor. He said, look, if an investor doesn't tell you yes, it's a no. They'll have lots of ways of saying no.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all want to say no in a way that respects your hard work. And we're not thinking, don't think that when we say no, we think you suck. It's like we're just not there yet for a plethora of reasons, and we don't want you to not come back to us if you figure something out. It's not a good fit now. We might say, oh, you're a little early for us. Here's what we'd like to see. Or, we're focusing on our portfolio right now and who knows what. But how do you feel about aggressively, and I use that word intentionally, aggressively going after a no? Get them to say no. Do you think that
I think it's pretty good. As long as you're not being, some founders I've known over the years are so aggressive, they're really bordering on pushy, and that's maybe the investor was just sort of not sure, but that aggressiveness of the founder, and I go into like the pushy stage, they're like that's a turnoff to me. These guys are too pushy. I can't see myself wanting to work with that guy because that Bob guy was so pushy. So there is a limit to that, but I think in general that's the right approach, and I would say many founders are a little bit too, they don't want to hear a no. It hurts a little bit to hear a no, right? So they don't want to push a little bit for that no because it doesn't feel good to get a no and get rejected. So I'd say many founders are a little bit too wishy-washy about that and probably need to, push a little bit harder without being that ultra pushy guy. Yeah,
no, that's right. I think that's smart. So when you think about and I want to talk a little bit longer about this because I think this is really important, and I feel it now as an investor in a different way. I think it took me half of my career as a founder to figure this out, and now I think I see it all the time. There's a wide chasm between possible and probable. And I think when we see investors and we hear all these somewhat apocryphal, sometimes certainly a lot of survivor bias about pitching 100 investors until finally finding the right investor and getting the very first investor invested after 100 pitches. Like what that sounds like to me is you were unfundable, right? If you spent 11 months talking to 100 investors and you finally got your first one and then you close your fund, your round after that, the lesson to take from that should not be persevere. It's a numbers game. You got to pitch, talk to as many investors as you can. It's like you spent a long time not getting connected to the right investor. And the reason I asked about the sort of post hoc analysis is because it's a real curiosity of mine. If you were to think about like possibility versus probability, like how many of those 200 that you pitched could you have said, well, it's possible, and so I pitched them. But if you were to really think about the probability, could they pitch? Yes, they could. But how do you? And I love the teaser deck. Here's 5 slides. Do we look like a fit? To me, it's about being direct. Not I don't I don't encourage aggression, but I encourage frankness and directness. Like, given what you know so far, are we interesting? Asking direct questions are, do you feel like we're a fit for your fund, for where you're at, or what? Like, those really direct questions can get you more mental space to work on the ones who are more probable. Get to a point where you're clearing out the ones who are less probable. And so, does that notion of probability versus like you're in the pipeline or you're not in the pipeline. I can't justify like not pitching you yet, but if you think about a probability, a range, as opposed to are they in or are they out of the pipeline, does that resonate with you? Does that make you think there's a way to refine your pitch list so you don't pitch 200, you pitch 130?
Yeah, it's. I think at the later stages, it's easier to build a probable list because you're probably also leaning on existing investors, your seed round VCs, et cetera, to build your pipeline. At the earlier stages, the seed round, there's going to be a lot more possible, right? So I think that the dynamic changes. But even so, there are many VCs. I'm like, these guys are perfect, right? They do seed stage, they do SaaS, they do blah, 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 blah. Like, this sounds like a perfect fit. And then you get in there like, no, we're looking for, it's like, it looks on paper a perfect fit, and then it's not when you actually get in there. So you're just going to have to kiss a lot of those frogs. But yeah, I think that it gets more probable dynamic as you progress.
Yeah.
I do see we had two questions.
We have a couple questions. There's actually three questions. So the first one, if you can see there from Jessica, is around that checklist of documents.
Yep.
You have data room in Foundersuite. Do you sort of pre-populate that with buckets that people fill, or does everybody still have to go in and say, okay, what document should I gather? Is there guidance on that? Do you have your own checklist? There are some common baskets of documents that you should have, but do you guys provide extra guidance on that, checklist of a kind?
I'll show you just do a very quick, and I have to get off in only about 4 minutes, but I'll show you one very, very quick thing. So we do have something in this document, which is if I can find it, a due diligence checklist. And oh, darn it. I can send that to you, Jessica. If you want to email me, Nathan@foundersuite.com, I'll find it. I'm not seeing right here. Oh, here it is. Sample due diligence request list. Hopefully this opens up. But I mean, this is kind of what it looks like, right? Market data, your sales, product, marketing strategy. It's kind of almost like a mini business plan, right? Your legal stuff, any tax, insurance, R&D, that's a sample diligence request list. And there are others out there on the web. It's pretty easy to find this stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there for that. And I will say too, the further up the funding stack you go, Series A and beyond, the diligence documentation required is much higher than pre-seed. Pre-seed, seed sort of straddles more than earlier, but not the same sort of Series A, B, C sort of list. But just to your point, just have a data room. Put the most interesting stuff out there. And if somebody asks for you something that you don't have, good, get it for them. And then it joins your data room and the next investor can see it. Another question from Vivian, do you have any advice for bootstrap founders who want to skip the seed round because the company is profitable already, for example, which is a terrific thing, and go straight to raising a Series A as the first time raising, which I take to mean go directly to institutional investors?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if you can do that, that's great, right? Skip giving away, at every progressive round, most people already know this, but at every progressive round, you're typically giving away less and less equity for a given amount of money. So if you can skip the seed round where you have to give away a lot of equity, great. What I would probably counsel you to do if you're going straight to Series A is learn online what is expected of a Series A company in terms of growth metrics. Every industry has, if you're e-commerce versus SaaS, there are different expectations of what Series A investors are looking to see. So get familiar with that for your particular industry. Make sure you've got that stuff. And then I also say, in addition to just having the right metrics in terms of growth rate, CAC, LTV stuff, having a pretty filled out management team if you're going up to Series A. I mean, at least, CTO, CEO, probably maybe a CFO or at least fractional CFO, and, the rest of it kind of filled out. You want to look and feel like a Series A company. Short answer, right?
Yeah. Good. So one last question from Guinevere about the impact of AI on fundraising. And specifically, she was asking about insights on sort of the people-centered AI and ethical stuff. How do you see how AI, and I think I've been the recipient of some AI stuff that people are doing to try to get my attention as an investor. What's your thoughts about how AI will contribute or detract from fundraising for startups?
It's a great, we're thinking about this a lot. Like, how do we do this in our product? We've taken the baby step of integrating ChatGPT in our email tools to help you write those emails. I think our next logical thing is to help you build that target list a little easier using AI, right? So you've got a more narrowly focused list versus just the search that you do now. I think I just still don't see a way that AI is going to. Raising capital is still a relationship business, and I don't see a way that AI is going to sort of change that. Like, for you to invest in me, Bob, you've got to get to know me, who I am. You've got to trust me. You ideally, like Mark Suster has that quote, VCs invest in lines, not dots, right? You want to kind of see what I've done with Foundersuite over a period of time. And I don't see how AI really impacts that portion. I do think it will help you identify the right investors, maybe help you with your company updates, your monthly updates, things like that, right? Yeah.
Well, if I can make a request, with your ChatGPT email writer integration, like there should be a toggle that says, do you want VCs to actually read your email? Right? And you can turn that on. And what ChatGPT does, it says whatever it's going to say on your behalf or whatever you're going to prompt it to say, it's 75 words or less. Right. One of the things that drives me crazy is I get the emails and I'm like, oh, someone's using an email GPT chat AI assistant, because now I'm getting, 7 paragraphs of lots of superlatives and just lots of I'm like, no, I want 3 bullet points. Like, don't send me a big email. I don't want a really well-written prose edition of what you want to talk about. I want to know the 3 things that are going to be relevant to me, and I want it like 7 words or less. So, make that one of the objectives of your email writer, is that it's so good at being succinct.
It's succinct. I think we have a length button in there, but that I like that, even like make it X number of letters or words. I like that.
No investor wants you to write more, right?
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
I gotta go.
Yeah, this was tremendous. I'll follow up with you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming and for listening. I will follow up with everybody who attended with the discount code for Foundersuite. I can't say enough about it. There's no better tool for fundraising. I say that not because I like Nathan, but because I use his tool, and I'm using his tool now. And it's the tool to use if you want to fundraise. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you very much.
And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Vivian. Nice comment. Bye, guys.